Brian Mounts from Turf Mechanic and turfmechanic.com. Today I want to talk to you about fine fescue. And really, more specifically, I want to talk about how it relates and compares and is different to tall fescue. For the vast majority of people who have lawns, most people don't really have a fine fescue lawn, like an only fine fescue lawn. Certainly there's some exceptions out there, but it's not normally the case. The reason for that is that fine fescue really doesn't do very well when it's in full sun and a lot of heat. This truly is a cold season grass. Turf type tall fescue is, there's lots of different cultivars, but turf type tall fescue excels in full sun, and it's got extremely deep roots, so it kind of excels even in drought conditions. So in the middle of the summer when it's hot and it's full sun and it's not very wet, your turf type tall fescue is going to hold up better than just about any cold season grass, especially if you kind of dial back the cutting and allow it to keep growing a little bit taller during the summer. It might start flopping over, but it's going to stay green and healthy longer than just about any other cold season grass in the middle of the heat. This, however, these are two different types of fine fescue. This right here is a creeping red fine fescue, and this is, what is it, Chewings? Can't remember. Chewings. That's Chewings fine fescue. Crazy is the fine fescues all look very, very similar. There's 4 main varieties. I also have sheep fine fescue over there, and I've got hard fine fescue over there. They all look pretty similar, but what I'm finding as I grow these, the Chewings fine fescue stands up a little bit more than all of the others, and it's got a little bit more color to it than the others. Now, these grasses are about maybe 5 to 6 weeks old. I'd have to double check, but they will continue to darken up. Like, all grass starts out kind of this more pale lime green, lighter color, lighter shades, and then they do darken up over time. But I suspect that none of these are truly going to be as dark as turf type tall fescue. That's one of, let's call them the improvements of turf type over older versions of tall fescue, like K31, and even prior to that, the rough fescues that were brought over in the 1800s. Fine fescue is super duper fine. These blades on all versions of the grass are very, very skinny, and I mean, it's like hair. As you run your fingers and hands across it, it's like you're rubbing hair. Like, it is really, really soft. As opposed to this, there's some tension, some bounce back. Now, it's not like it's abrasive, but it feels like grass. It feels like grass. This feels like hair. And these blades, even as the grass continues to mature, are never going to widen more than really what they are right now. Just imagine any grass that you have planted. Those first seedlings that come up, they're super duper fine. That's basically what fine fescue looks like forever, for its entire lifespan. Some versions of fine fescue are labeled or considered to be no-mow grasses, meaning you can basically let them grow and then they'll slowly flop over and they'll just kind of contain themselves, and you almost never have to mow them unless you really want to. If you want that, that standing upright grass, then you're gonna want to tend to it more frequently and mow it. In fact, you'll find in golf course settings on fairways and greens, they use fine fescue a lot, because although you don't have to mow it, it can just kind of clump and lay on top of itself. If you do mow it, you can actually mow it extremely, extremely short. Many putting greens in golf courses around the country use different kinds of fine fescues, and they cut those things at like 1/8 of an inch sometimes. So if you are interested in having a lawn that is extraordinarily short, almost like, what is it, like the fake like grass carpet that some people put on like their patios and whatnot, you can basically achieve that with a fine fescue. Now, if it's going to be in the full sun, then it's going to require some extra maintenance, and certainly if the temperatures get hot, it's gonna struggle. But in colder climates up north, it can work quite well. And if you've got a particularly shady yard, then it can work well as well. Now, lots of times when you're buying, let's say like a fescue blend, like a sun and shade blend, you're going to be getting a mix of tall fescues and fine fescues, because tall fescues really like the sun. So let's say the tree is blocking the sun in the morning and not blocking it in the evening. This is going to perform well during those sunny times of the day, you know, as if they turn themselves on and off, which of course they don't. But this is going to thrive because of the sun that happens for part of the day. And this is going to thrive because of the shade that happens through part of the day. So over there on that side of my house is a very shady spot. I've got large trees and a house. There's only a small window of time during the day that that part of the house gets full sun. We're talking just a couple hours or so of full sun. A grass type like this would actually thrive in that environment because it's never particularly hot over there, and it's almost always fully shaded or close to it. This type of grass does really well underneath trees, really established, mature trees in the shade of a house, maybe on the north side of your house, you know, assuming you're in the northern hemisphere. These grasses have shallower root systems than turf types. However, because they're not planted in full sun, or at least they shouldn't be, you don't quite have the same, let's call it energy drain. You don't need to water them quite as much because they should be shaded and they should be holding moisture better. The full sun will, of course, I mean, the blades are really, really thin. The full sun is harder on the blades, and you can actually see that on some of my pots. On the edges of the pots, certainly the other pots that I've got over there, I'll put a picture up of them. On the edges, the grass is really browned out because as the sun hits this pot, it warms up the soil, and it has really stressed out the edges of the pot. So full sun is it's rough on these grasses, and when you find them in sun and shade mixes or some sort of mix, sometimes you'll see fine fescue mixed into Kentucky bluegrass, or you'll find it mixed into turf type tall fescue or some tall fescue blend. Lots of times these fine fescue blades sit below the surface, so the grass that's poking up is usually this. And then underneath, if you kind of dig in there, you can usually find small, thin blades, and that's usually this. It's kind of creeping underneath. Creeping. This is the creeping red. I should also say that fine fescues and tall fescues, for the majority, the vast majority of them, are all bunch type grasses, and you can even see the bunch type in these grass blades. As fine as they are, I took some really close-up pictures that I'm going to throw up here so you can see, but you can literally see the grass blade coming up and splitting into multiple leaves. So they're all bunch type except for creeping red. Creeping red has small rhizomes, and it can spread. It's nowhere near as significant of a rhizome kind of growth pattern as some other grasses out there. But they do have rhizomes, and they will spread. That's why it's called creeping. It doesn't go very fast or very far, but it will spread laterally as opposed to bunching over the top of the soil surface. There are some new varieties of turf type tall fescue. They're like, what are they called? Like rhizomatic cultivars. I don't know how prevalent those things are and I've never seen one in person. At some point I'm going to have to experiment and find some seed. If you don't like mowing your grass and you live in a colder climate, and especially if you've got a lot of shade or potential for shade throughout like the warmer parts of the day, the fine fescues are an excellent option because they will require less maintenance. They'll require less water. They'll require less fertilizer. They'll require less mowing. Now, your lawn is never going to look like perfectly flat if you're not mowing these, because they will lump and clump. They're not really clumping, but as the wind, I mean, you can see it here, like all of the grass is going in certain directions because I have wind here on my property. And since they're in pots, it just hits the grass and it blows it all one way, and then it just kind of stays like that because the grass blades are so fine and intertwined with each other that they just kind of sit there like a mat. If I wanted to get this to perk up all the way, it'd actually be kind of hard because it's so thick. There are definitely reasons to put fine fescue in a lawn, but quite honestly, you're rarely going to put fine fescue down by itself. It's almost always in a mix. Sometimes it's even used as an ornamental. However, if you are looking to overseed or plant a new lawn, or it might be worth your time to find some other shade tolerant grasses, because this is only going to work in certain situations. It doesn't particularly like lots of foot traffic. So if this is in a main lawn and you got kids or animals, it's probably not the best option. I do have on my website, which is linked below in the description, a full page dedicated to shade tolerant grasses. You can go take a look at that for some other options. But I do know that lots of people are in the seeding mode right now, and fescue is a very common grass up north. When I started this project of Turf Mechanic, quite honestly, I had no experience with fine fescue, so I didn't know exactly what the difference was at all, although it was a pretty stark difference once I started researching it. In future videos coming up, I hope you subscribe to watch these as they come out. I'm going to be doing some thorough comparisons of the 4 different types, or the 4 different main types of fine fescue. Again, I got the creeping red, I got the chewings. I like the chewings a lot. The sheep fescue and the hard fescue are pretty interesting. They seem to be more susceptible to heat or drought, but that's just in my initial test. In a video coming up, I'm going to be doing a lot of detailed comparisons of the actual fine fescue grass types. I hope you stick around and watch some of those as they come out this fall. Thank you very much for watching. Take a look at that link down below and hit the like and subscribe button if you haven't already. Thank you very much, and have a great one.